Welcome to Paradigm Playbook, the podcast on the business of sports. With 50 plus years of experience, Steve Cook shares insights weekly, featuring top playmakers shaping the industry. Get ready to script your next play. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to Paradigm Playbook. I'm the host, Steve Cook. I'm alongside of Mr. John Asher today. I'm very excited. John and I are of similar mindsets in that we're sales-based people. John has taken it to the ultimate level and is a world-known expert on selling, has written several books. I know the neuroscience of selling is one, and I believe Close Deals Faster, maybe another one, but John's going to tell us more. And what we want to talk today about is all of us entrepreneurs in this business, how we can get a little bit more of a sales mindset. So with that, John, do you want to introduce yourself in any way that you like?
Sure. So my first career was in the Navy. I was the captain of 2 fast attack nuclear subs. And then I went to the Pentagon as a buyer and a program manager for 5 years. Then left that, started an engineering company, grew it up, sold it, started a sales advisory services company. And there's a lot of them out there. We're just one of them. We do the standard 4 things. We have aptitude assessments, which measures how much genes people have for sales, whether it's hunter, account manager, or customer service. We do sales training, of course. We do sales process improvement, and we coach CEOs, entrepreneurs, and sales managers. We don't coach salespeople because it's too damn hard. We'd much rather coach a sales manager and get them to coach the salespeople.
So one of the issues that we have, John, and I'm sure you'll relate to this, is a lot of the entrepreneurs, and that's our audience now, is entrepreneurs in the sports business, don't think of themselves or don't like to think of themselves as salespeople. So I'm forever convincing them that it's the most important job that you do. So if we, maybe you can put better words on it, are in the business of convincing people or changing people's minds about a program, an activity, an event, or something like that, and less about sales. If they think they're not selling, maybe they'll approach it with a little bit more fun.
In our company, we have a little joke among all of us sales guys. We'll ask the other, are you a salesperson? And the answer is no. And then the question comes, well, what are you? And the answer is, I'm a problem solver. I'm not a salesperson.
Yeah.
That's one way to think about it. Now, Charles Schwab says we're all in sales. The late, great Zig Ziglar used to say, no sales, no company. And Dan Pink, in his book, To Sell is Human, claims that 1 in 9 of us is a salesperson. And we're selling ourselves. We're selling our ideas. We're selling to the boss is selling to us. We're selling to our team. So we're essentially all in sales. I'll give you 2 practical examples. I've got 6 kids. My oldest daughter is an attorney. I'll apologize for that in advance. And she's a criminal defense attorney. So she went to law school, couldn't get in the real prestigious ones because they were too expensive. So she went to a bottom third law school. She and her husband worked their way through. They were a server and a bartender on the weekends, so she made spending money. Worked for the Baltimore City prosecutor's office, got some experience, and then joined a law firm, the biggest law firm in Baltimore. And there was, like, as I remember, 35 lawyers. Within 1 year, she was the #1 salesperson. She was bringing in more business than even the owner. So now you might say lawyers aren't really salespeople. But when you think about a criminal defense attorney, they're selling to the accused to get their business to represent them. They're selling to the judge. They're selling to the jury. And if it's a public trial, like she and her husband were defending the thin suit, that was that diet pill gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in a public trial, you're selling to the public to get them to join up. And of course, the accused wants to cop a deal, you're selling to the prosecutor, and you got to sell it to the judge. So let's take that. That's an attorney. Nobody thinks they're salespeople. She's totally 100% a salesperson.
It's really interesting because most of my audience will think of themselves as entrepreneurs that are business owners running a business, but their primary job is to get customers in the business. And to do that, every sale is 2 sales. You have to sell the child that it's going to be fun to do, and you have to sell the parent that it's going to be good for them and of great value. So there's 2 sales in every correspondence in what we're doing. So John and I met, or I was introduced to John through Vistage and my friend Joe Graham at AirTrack, or he's also now the owner of Mancino and a couple other companies, but he had John in to give a talk or a webinar, I'm not sure what it was, but the talk was on the neuroscience of selling, which is one of John's books. And I thought, John, if you don't mind, I'd like to dig into it a little bit because I found it astonishing. So you had a list of 50
biases.
Yeah, the biases that are in the minds of the buyers. So could you just give us a couple examples of, as sellers, what we need to be aware of in the mind of the buyer?
I want to give you one more example of selling and then delve into that.
Okay, thank you.
So my last job in the Navy, I'm a program manager of a big program. And when you're the program manager, you're the buyer, of course. So your staff puts out RFPs, big defense contractors bid on them, and you pick one. So you're a buyer. You're also a program manager. You're running the program. And number three, you are totally 100% a salesperson. You have to keep the program sold. You have to fight off budget cuts. You have to brief people and sell them in the DOD and the CIA and the DARPA and all these associated organizations that were with the program. You got to go over to the House of Armed Services, Senate and House committees and find the person in charge of your program, sell it to them. If you're a major program manager in the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, and you can't sell, you're out in about 3 months. Anyway, I just wanted to give another example.
And you could probably go into any career and make the case that the most important part of your job is selling, whether you're a teacher, a professor in college, or a coach of a football team. Anything I can think of is predominantly selling. So let's dig into some of the biases around that we're dealing with in a buyer's mind.
So one way to think about this is go back to our ancestors. They went through what's called feast or famine that we're all familiar with. In other words, when they made a kill, they had to eat as much as possible because they didn't know where the next meal was coming from. If you watch a wild animal video, the lions make a kill, they eat so much they can barely stand up because they don't know when the next meal is coming from. And our ancestors learned after quite some time, probably hundreds of thousands of years, that our brain burns 20% of the energy being burnt by our whole body. So all of us right now, we're all probably sitting down. 20% of the energy we're burning is from our brain. So our ancestors got that, and they started to develop shortcuts or rules of thumb, so they didn't have to make the same decisions over and over again. And these shortcuts, rules of thumb, that are almost always right, are called by the neuroscience cognitive brain biases. In other words, we're biased towards making a quick decision so we don't have to burn energy. And the other way to think about this is there's three areas of our brain. There's the rational brain. We're all using it right now. We're talking, we're listening, we may be taking notes, we're developing software. So that's our rational brain. We realize what we're doing. There are two parts of our brain called the unconscious brain. One's called the emotional brain, and the other's called the instinctive, sometimes called the reptilian brain. In other words, we make quick decisions based on instinct or quick ones based on emotion. And so the whole group of cognitive biases are either responding to the unconscious emotional brain, the unconscious instinctive brain, and telling the rational brain what to do. Here's a fun example. So a middle-aged guy gets a red Jaguar convertible, kind of the midlife crisis type of thing. Did he buy that Jaguar because it has such a great engine? No. Why'd he buy it? Because he wanted to look good. That's why I bought it. And maybe attract younger women or whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
That's what's called an emotional buy. And so some of these cognitive biases directly relate to sales. Let's take the first one. It's called the complement bias. And a little background. The guy who started the Gallup organization got his PhD at the University of Nebraska in the 70s. And that was when all psychologists were writing their thesis on how to fix people. He took the opposite tack. How do you make people better? And he studied it in 200 companies, and he was able to divide them into the majority of the companies and then a small group of the companies. And the small group had what he called a cognitive bias, meaning a complement bias, one of the cognitive biases. In that type of companies, everyone was complimenting each other, building each other up. And in the normal companies, the vast majority, it was inside politics, there were cliques, people were tearing people down, talking behind people's back and that sort of thing. And the difference in the financial performance of the companies was really incredible. The small group that had the complement bias way outperformed all the rest of the companies. So the bottom line for sales is always compliment the buyer right away. So if you were at a dance studio and the mother and the daughter came in, give both of them a compliment compliment fairly early in the conversation. And it can't just be a compliment about their blouse or their shirt or that sort of thing. It should be a compliment where you've done some research. Maybe you watched something on their website or in their LinkedIn profile. So you could compliment them about supporting the local Little League team or a video you watched on their website. So the bottom line from the compliment bias is when we receive a compliment that's meaningful, specific, a lightning bolt goes off in our emotional brain. We remember the compliment. And of course, we remember the person who gave us the compliment.
I love this. And I think that there's just so many ways that we can use the compliment bias within our initial introduction. Like you said, say it early in the conversation, but something as simple as, I notice your child has very good posture. That will serve her well in dance. Your daughter seems like she communicates well. I like the fact that your daughter has good eye contact. You don't have to be an A student or a valedictorian. You can compliment on very small things, but small things that will affect it. And the parent gets their pride feathers up. And that's when you have to find a way to pull the parent in. Your child seems to have good posture. She's obviously getting some good instruction at home. If we go to little things like that, and that's not closing the sale, that's setting a groundwork, or how would you say that you use that as a preparatory technique? Or
Number two would be the reciprocity bias. When somebody does you a favor, the answer is almost always much obliged. So much obliged does not mean a little bit obliged. It means a lot obliged. So again, it has a tremendous impact on people. And so what happens in their instinctive brain is they are now organized to give back to you because what you did for them. An example in sales would be if you give the buyer the gift of really listening to them, taking notes, repeating it back, doing what all salespeople should do, then the buyer is usually so impressed, they will return the gift by giving you deep insight into what's going on in their organization. So that's the second one that's very important, called the reciprocity bias.
So I love this. And if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to give an example in my world where someone stops into your facility. And so I run a baseball facility, and someone stops in to ask about lessons or see about what we do. And if you consider that a compliment to you, they took the time out of their day to come see you, then the reciprocity would be to thank them for their time and say, whether it's an email, a text, or a simple thank you, I really appreciate you stopping in, look forward to seeing you again. Anything that reciprocates the gift that they gave you, however small it is.
Exactly.
The problem we had when we went through these before, and as I tell you, there's 50 of them, right? You have 50 of these. So we're not going to do all 50 down. We're scare anybody.
No.
But John is so good at this that what I want to make sure everybody is picking up on is that this is not somebody that's just trying to sell a physical thing. This is not just for a car salesman, or this is for anybody that, so Zig, John and I both look up to Zig and learn so much from Zig. But one of the things he said, that selling is nothing more than a transference of feeling. If I can get you to feel as positive about something as I do, then you're going to accept it. So what I feel positive about is taking dance lessons with us. And I have to get that feeling to transfer. So now we have two, the compliment and the reciprocity. Okay, so are we ready for number three?
Sure, you can take that one step further. And that is probably the most famous statement by Ziegler was, buyers want to know that you care before they care to know what you know. In other words, they want to know that you care about them and their problem or their need before they care to know about your dance studio.
Yeah, and we don't want to wait until the deal is closed to then start thinking that we're going to reciprocate or we're going to give back. It's got to happen in the very beginning along the way so that you're building this relationship from the beginning. It doesn't all of a sudden just happen.
An example, Steve, of the reciprocity bias could be they come into the dance studio and then you, as the owner or salesperson, show the daughter there's 15 different headbands and ask her to pick one.
Yeah.
You're giving a gift right away.
It's simple. And sometimes we don't think of those. So there's a lot of places where we'll say, okay, everybody that signs up for a class gets a headband. So what John's saying is for the value of the 50-cent headband, you're better off giving them in advance to the prospect versus the secured customer. Is that still reciprocity? If you lead and go first, is it still considered reciprocity, or is there another name for that?
No, you're giving a gift because you want the gift back that they're going to sign up for the dance list.
So you're getting ahead of it. So I like
Right.
that.
They'll always give the gift first.
Okay. I'm ready for number 3.
Yeah, and my wife and I went to a furniture store between Christmas and New Year's because they had a big sale. When we walked in, they gave us a bottle of champagne. And later, I asked the manager, we got talking to him, how does that work out? He said, oh, sales are up by 30% when we do that. A bottle of champagne, $10, but you're buying a $2,000 couch or whatever. So it's nothing really.
Yeah, and you don't have to sell to everybody. What I find interesting, boy, we could do this whole podcast just on Zig Ziglar quotes and sayings, but the gift given in the beginning is remembered immediately by the customers, but it's remembered always by everybody. I don't know whether you bought a couch that day or not, but you're telling that story. You remember the guy that gave you that, whether you bought anything or not. And so I've got another podcast coming up later on brand building, and that's how you build your brand, is by being known as the person that gives the champagne bottle. Maybe not the right thing to give out at a child's dance studio, but we can do something else. The headband, we'll go back to the headband.
But another bias is called the similarity bias. It is the strongest bias of all 184 biases. So there's 184 of them, about 45 or 50, as Steve mentioned, apply to sales and marketing. So the similarity bias is almost the strongest. Here's a little background. When I was in college, I took an elective course called the History of War, and there was only 2 big ideas. One was, in the last 3,000 years of recorded history, there's only been 27 years when there was no war. Look at today, you got the Iran-US war, Hamas-Israeli war, and civil wars in Yemen, Ethiopia, and Sudan. We have 5 wars going on right now. The second big idea was all of those wars were caused by one of 3 things. One, religion against another. And if you studied world history 1,000 years ago, the Catholic Pope commissioned 6 crusades, armies, to go kick the Muslims out of Jerusalem. Back then it was called the Philistines. Today it's called the Palestinians. It's the same place. And number 2 was one ethnic background against another. So in China, it's the Huns and the Uyghurs. In India, it's the Christians and the Muslims and the Hindus. In the U.S., we have 4 different ethnic backgrounds, as we all know. And we all know not all 4 of us are happy with each other all the time. And number 3 was the battle over resources, which explains the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia was that eastern industrial heartland of Ukraine. So imagine, based on the history of the world, 2 of the 3 reasons for all wars in the history of the world are based on the similarity bias. That's how strong it is. Quick example. A Homo sapien meets a Homo sapien in the jungle or on the savannah, that looks safe. A Homo sapien meets a Neanderthal, that doesn't look safe, and probably explains why the Neanderthals never made it, and only 2% of our DNA is from the Neanderthals. So now let's apply it to sales. Number 1, the elite salespeople will find out the personality style of the buyer before they interact. And you can find that out from Crystal Knows. It's a web app. Crystal is a woman's name, Crystal, and Knows is not knows, but knows you, Knows. So you go to Crystal Knows, you put in the buyer's name, the company, and it comes right back with which of the disc profiles they are. So for me personally, I will never, ever, under any circumstances, get on a Zoom call where I don't know the personality style of the buyer. It just gives me too much of an advantage not to have that. So that's number 1. Find out the personality style of the buyer. Number 2, find out something that's the same in your background and their background. Because when you first meet a salesperson, if you're the buyer, you have what's called, they call it in China and Japan, the buyer's mask on. We're not talking to the real person. They're playing the role of the buyer. So we only get the damn mask off so they'll tell us what's really going on. So when you bring up something in their background and your background that's similar, as you start to talk about it, in their emotional brain, it goes, this person is just like me. Therefore, they must be safe. Now, when you get somebody walking into a studio, you can't have that. They're walking in as a stranger, then you can't get that information. But if they've made an appointment to come into the studio, you can, in fact, get yourself armed with that information. Then the third way you use a similarity bias is what's called mirroring. And mirroring means so I'm a communicator, and Steve probably is too. So we're big picture thinkers, people-oriented. Let's say Steve was not. Let's say he was a thinker. In other words, he's detail-oriented and task-oriented, and he's the buyer and I'm the salesperson. I don't want to give him details. I hate details. And I don't want to talk about tasks. I want to talk about people stuff. But unless I shift how I interact with Steve, I have to know I've got to give him the details details. And I can't do a bunch of rapport building because he doesn't want it. And he didn't care about the big picture. He just wants the details. So mirroring doesn't mean you have to act like the other person. Just give them what they need to make a decision, not what you want to give based on your personality style. That's 3 ways to take advantage of what's called the similarity bias, the strongest bias.
And it's interesting. There's some simple ways to do very small versions of that. One of the things we have going on in today's world, there's a lot of people that wear some of their opinions on their clothing. They'll wear a branded t-shirt, a logoed football jersey. I'm from Philadelphia and John's from Washington. So rather than say, for me, it's the Philadelphia Eagles against the Washington Commanders, rather than say, John, I'm a Birds fan, what's wrong with you? It's interesting that we're both football fans. Or are you a Commanders fan? There's things that people tell you about themselves when they first walk in, whether it's the name of their school, the high school, where they grew up. There's lots of things where we can get information. And John mentioned that when people come in as strangers, you may not know. But part of the similarity is reading something about them or coming up with a question that gives you information about them, not about their buying decision, but about them, like where they went to school or what they do, or do you live close to here, or where you work, or things like that. You can ask and show an interest in them and then create the similarity to them. And it happens more than you think. There's so much that you can do. And I love the mirror, imaging that you can do to kind of get with somebody in their head. I think it's awesome if you can think about these things. Let's go one more. I get too carried away with these things. Let's go one more deep.
All right, I'll give you 2 that go together.
Okay.
First is called the single option aversion bias, meaning buyers are adverse to buying when you only offer one option. In other words, your daughter could come in with our weekly program for 3 months. That's the standard. That'll be a standard offer. And the closing rates for when you offer one option are about 10%, just nationwide, all sales. If you offer a second option, then where the buyer can see the difference between the two, the closing rate goes up to 60%. So the bottom line is, from the single option aversion bias, is never, ever, under any circumstances, only offer one option.
Zig used to call that the alternate choice close. Yeah.
Well,
similar.
Yes, similar. And I'll give you the second one that goes along with it, and that's called the choice paradox bias. And the choice means buyers like to have choices, but not too many. So many salespeople think, if I could just offer them 7 products, show them all 7 of our products, one's bound to be the perfect one. If you offer more than 3, the buyer's emotional brain becomes confused. So from the choice paradox bias, never offer more than 3 options. So now let's combine the 2. Single option aversion, never offer only 1. Choice paradox, never offer more than 3. Therefore, always offer 2 or 3 options to get the highest closing rate. And you see this play out in real life all the time. It used to be we could design our own truck or car, but now for every model, there's 2 or 3 choices. If you take your partner out to anniversary dinner at a nice restaurant and they have specials, how many specials do they have? 2 or 3. So there's the 2 that kind of go together to form a sales technique. Always offer 2 or 3 options.
Yeah, so I think some of the play on that going into a sports facility is offering an option of a class that goes on 2 times a week or one that only goes once a week. So 1, it helps them decide. 2, it helps you to know their mindset and their confidence level going in. And I think we can do that with all sports. And would you rather be in a full gymnastic class or start with just a tumbling class? So this one I think is big in the child activity center world, is having those options. We tend to sometimes kind of force feed kids into progressions of, if you're not getting better, we don't have a place for you. So we're building a pyramid that's forcing kids out rather than giving them an alternate choice at the next level. So you pick 1 or 2, you grow, then you pick 1 or 2 and you grow and you pick 1 or 2. So I think there's a ton of ways to use that. John, I need a way to convince people that 1, you don't have to be any kind of mastermind or genius genius to be a salesperson, but you do have to be somewhat disciplined in the questions you ask. I think like reading a book like John's, where you read this and you're in two positions in this, I think. You can correct me if I'm wrong. One, you're using this information to help people come to your side of thinking, or they're using it on you, but it's being used. So it's in there. Am I missing anything in the approach to how to use this?
No, I think you got it. Excellent, Steve.
This is going to take a follow-up call because we can keep going through the biases all the time. But I think people have to get it fixated in their head that selling isn't difficult, but it has to be one of those atomic habits that you're always thinking about. And whether you're trying to get a kid to come to your program, you're trying to get Congress to rule on something, you're trying to convince the jury to do something, or you're trying to get a date, it's all selling. And it all works in the neuroscience. John, before we go, can you share with the audience I assume your books are on Amazon. Tell us how to get your books.
It's on Amazon. It's called The Neuroscience of Selling.
I like the tagline that goes with it. It says the proven sales secrets to win over the buyer's heart and mind. And I think that's important because it's not one or the other. You need both to complete the sale. So that's good. What was I right? Are there other books?
Actually, the first one I wrote was in China, and it was funded by Alibaba and Haier, the air conditioning guys, as a way to teach Chinese salespeople how to sell to Western countries. And then there was Close Deals Faster, The Neuroscience of Sales, and the last one was The Future of Sales.
Did you write a book on a different topic totally?
Yes, my latest book is Age Reversal Strategies for an Unlimited Health Span.
So I guess I've aged into reading that one. I have to do that. I just ordered the Neuroscience of Selling, so I'm going to dig into that one while I'm on vacation. But then I think that last one is something that at my age I need to dig into. Somebody just wants to reach out to you. Are you available on LinkedIn or?
Sure, just my name on LinkedIn.
It's John Asher, Asher. He's easy to find there. I think he's the first John Asher that comes up when you go into LinkedIn, and you'll see his pretty face and we'll be good to go. So John, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's fun, and we are definitely going to do this again.
Great to see you, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Paradigm Playbook. Explore more at ParadigmPlaybook.com. Want to be a playmaker? Contact StephenJCook.com. Share this episode to spread the word about sports industry opportunities. See you next week.